Hi guys, my name is Casey. Welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be doing my March reading wrap-up, which is very exciting.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di
I'm really warm all of a sudden. So I thought I did a really terrible job of reading in March, but I actually read 5 books, which is pretty standard, so I don't really know what happened there. Granted, one of them was a poetry book. I confess I read some poetry in March, and that was obviously a bit shorter, but it actually took me a little bit of time to read. So, you know what? Poetry still counts, guys. In my previous video, I'd alluded to the fact that a few things were changing for me, and that's why reading was so abysmal, and honestly, it did feel like it. And I think the reason it's feeling like the reading is not happening is because I have been like in the middle of like 6 books, the same 6 books, 5 books, however many, for a really long time. So I think if I make the effort to just sit down and finish a few of them, I won't feel so stagnated. But aside from that, I feel like every time I sit down and film, like every week, something else has changed, and some really exciting things have been happening in my life in terms of work-wise stuff that I'll hopefully be able to share with you soon. But basically, I have left one job and have the promise of starting another soon, which is really exciting news, and I'm basically dying slowly at uni with the amount of work I have to do, so that's all fun. So those are all the wonderful factors surrounding my reading life which are causing me to have difficulties reading all the books. I just want to read. I don't want to do anything else. I hate having responsibilities. But let's get through the books I read. I haven't forgotten to talk about any audiobooks. I didn't finish any last month, and yet again I've not finished another one. I moved from Magician by Raymond Feist, which I was struggling to finish, to Barack Obama's latest book, A Promised Land, and I'm also struggling with that one. So I feel like I'm just tanking my audiobook reading at the moment, but I'm determined to try and finish those off. I'm like halfway through Obama's book and I'm gonna push through, guys. So there may not be any audiobook wrap-ups for a little while, but that's fine. It's all good. It's all fun and games. I'll just have a wonderful backlog, and eventually I'll get round to the next Outlander, and that's all I really want in life. So the first book that I read was actually a huge disappointment, so let's start with that one. I received Game Changer by Neil Shusterman from Walker Books Australia for review. Thank you very kindly, but I didn't like it. I rated it 2 out of 5 stars. I've debated doing a review on here for this one, but I think I just don't have the energy right now to put towards this book. So I have written a full review over on my blog if you want my thoughts outlined nice and prettily for you as to why this book really just didn't work for me. I found this book borderline problematic, and it was one of the first books I finished in March. So it wasn't the best way to start off with it. I was really excited about it. It's all about this soccer football player. I'm not sure what the sport is. The one where they run at each other really hard. And he basically, every time he gets knocked really hard, he changes and shifts and goes to a parallel world. And things things seem to be worse every time it changes, just small changes at the beginning, and then they get much bigger. And I think what Neil Shusterman was trying to do in this book was tackle some big issues such as race and sexism and things along those lines within the whole singular book that's only just, 350 pages long, not quite 400 pages. And in a YA dystopian fact, it was just like completely the wrong format, and it just didn't work for me. There were a lot of issues with the ways that he tried to tackle this, and it just sort of became a little bit problematic. So like I said, if you want to hear me explain those thoughts in more detail, then head over to ozbooksnow.com and have a read. But yeah, this was a 2 out of 5 star read for me. So disappointed, because I usually love Neil Shusterman, but alas, there we go. The next book I read was also slightly interesting. I just really wasn't having a good month with non-problematic books, and that was November 9 by Colleen Hoover. So tick, this is working towards my annual goal of reading as many Colleen Hoover books as I can, because they are very easy and fun to read. But this is the first one that I've read where I've gone, or at least the first one I've read and been old enough to actually sit back and go, I don't know if that's okay. So this is about 2 characters who just sort of supposedly meet quite randomly, and then they sort of hit it off straight away, but one of them's moving to New York from LA and one of them's staying, and they basically agree that they're not going to get too attached and start long distance, and they will just meet each other for the next 5 years until the main girl reaches however old she wants to be before she considers dating. There's reasons behind this particular age thing. So every 5 years they're supposed to meet on November 9, and as they do, more and more things unfold in the story. Now obviously I can't tell you the problem with this book because it's a huge spoiler. I discussed this again over my review on my blog, so head over there if you want to hear my reasons in a hidden spoiler section as to the problems with this one. But overall, like, it was a really enjoyable romance, as Colleen Hoover always is, but when I started thinking about the reasons behind it, I was really questioning the main character's choices, and I just thought it wasn't a very good example and not a good way to teach people who are reading these romance books to set up expectations about relationships. It certainly was a really good guidebook of how to get into a toxic relationship, let's just put it that way. So I think I rated this one 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I can't remember because I never can. Everyone is being noisy everywhere. So I actually rated this 3.5 stars, and now that more time has passed since I read this, I will be lowering this to 3 out of 5 stars because I think I was having trouble convincing myself to, like, bring down my rating of a Colleen Hoover book. But yes, interesting book. Wouldn't say don't read it, but definitely keep an open mind when you do read it. The next book I read was another review copy, and that was Mercurial by Naomi Hughes. Now this was incredible. This was a 4-star read for me. It's a YA fantasy and it was gloriously fun. I really enjoy reading this. I read it on my Kindle. So this one has a beautiful cover. I've not heard like anybody talking about it, and you're all missing out is all I can say. This was just this wonderful, stabby, angsty sort of YA read where we've got this main character who is bound to this sort of empress-like character. She's the younger sister of the actual empress, so she's, you know, like empress in training. And she's this horrible character called the Destroyer. And Tal, the main character, is bound to her by this blood oath, which means that he physically cannot disobey this oath. He is compelled like a puppet on strings to carry out her commands, and he can't hurt her, etc., etc. And it's sort of like we begin 2 years prior and then we get to 2 years after, and that's how long he's been bound to her, and he's just developed such bitterness and hatred for her. But it's one of those really, really glorious novels where you have this spectacular enemies to lovers sort of development as they both start questioning themselves after a specific event happens which causes the Destroyer to lose her memory, and she kind of appears a bit nice, which is really, really confusing for Tal, who wants nothing more than to kill her and get rid of her and save his own people. So there's just this glorious sort of snowscape setting where there's this mountain and they're sort of trekking to save each other, and someone's always mortally wounded, and it's just glorious. It's a really, really fun, easy read, and I think it was about 450 pages long, but it felt like it was 200 pages. If you can get your hands on a copy of this book, then I highly recommend you do, because it was just so much fun. So much fun. So thank you, NetGalley, for a copy of that one. The next book was another review copy. I am upholding my word, and I am actually doing my best to get through review copies, and this one's from Bloomsbury, and it was In Control, Dangerous Relationships and How They End in Murder by Jane Monckton Smith. Now, this is obviously a very serious topic. It's quite a heavy-hitting book. It was a really tough week whilst I was reading this one because it was just so many dark themes, but wow, this is definitely needed. I have got a full review up of this on my blog, so I think just for the sake of any trigger warnings right now, I'm not going to go into depth about this, but this is about domestic violence, and it is this author who is an ex-police officer who worked in the homicide squad. It is her research into identifying, through 8 steps, identifying controlling behaviour that could lead to domestic abuse and potentially homicide. So if you want to know more about what's in here and some quotes and examples of the stuff that she's talking about, again, head over to my blog and see my full review there, but we won't talk about this anymore here. But this was easily a 5 out of 5 star read to me, and I would say some like recommended reading for women in particular, so that you can identify bad signs in relationships and get out. So that brings me to the final book that I read, and that was the poetry. So I got to that point and was feeling very overwhelmed and thought that the best remedy at that point would be to pick up some poetry. So I recently bought a collection of poetry by Edgar Guest, and I picked up the volume A Heap o' Livin'. So if you've seen my book haul, whenever it was I hauled these, you'll know that this is sort of a spontaneous purchase because of someone reading the poems out on TikTok, but I really, really enjoyed this. This has really strong themes of like love and family love and home. So there's some beautiful poems, and you can kind of see I've gone through and tabbed the ones that I really liked, but I think these are beautiful. These are definitely poems I'd like to go back to on tough days, you know, and read and remind yourself of stuff. Shall I read you a poem? For example, let's do a poetry reading. This one's called Take Home a Smile. Take home a smile, forget the petty cares, the dull grim grind of all the day's affairs. The day is done, come be yourself a while. Tonight, to those who wait, take home a smile. Take home a smile, don't scatter grief and gloom, where laughter and light hearts should always bloom. What though you've travelled many a dusty mile, footsore and weary, still take home a smile. Take home a smile, it's not much to do, but much it means to them who wait for you. You can be brave for such a little while, the day of doubt is done. Take home a smile. Just lots of little cute things like that, which I thought were fantastic. I'm pretty sure I rated this 5 stars because what else does one rate a glorious book of poetry? So I was really pleased with my decision to purchase these volumes, and I cannot wait to pick up the other 2 at such a time as suits me in the future. So all in all, relatively decent month of reading in March. It didn't feel like it. It felt like I read some strange books, a couple of disappointing ones, a really heavy one and some poetry, and then one fantasy. Really strange month of reading genre-wise for me. I'm definitely finding myself really drawn to a lot of non-fiction at the moment. There are a couple of other non-fiction books that I will hopefully be wrapping up in April for you at the end of the month. I'm just addicted to the genre right now and I'm really, really enjoying it. But I'd love to know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books or if you're planning on reading any of them, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.
Alle gloria militar